Monster by Naoki Urasawa is potentially most well known for its antagonist, Johan, the sociopath or psychopath that put an expert doctor on a mission to rewrite his past mistake. Johan is an extremely philosophical character that is both terrifying and interesting. Although Johan is great because of how he fills his role of antagonist, he's also amazing because of the message that he conveys about humanity. Likewise, the whole series is great for this reason. I often find that the reason I enjoy Monster so much is because of those small human moments that feel so true and honest to real people. To contrast that, we see mass terror, death, and pain. The series is filled with so much loss. So far, I've only read the series once, but I feel that I would have to reread it several times over to fully understand everything that this author or manga artist put into this story. Regardless of only reading it once, I still have a lot to say about it. I finished the last volume months, I think like a month or several weeks ago. It was a long time ago, but the ideas, the scenes, and the dialogue are still floating around my mind. I'm still pondering the content of that beautifully crafted series. I usually review novels and books, but this series has proven to be so thought provoking and personally impactful that I feel I owe it my thoughts. This video will be like a sort of love letter to Monster. If you haven't read Monster, this is your spoiler warning. So, spoiler warning. I won't go into spoilers for the intention or for just having spoilers, but in talking about certain content of the series, some things may be spoiled. If you haven't read Monster but you plan on reading it, I urge you drop everything you're doing and read it. Go find a cabin in the woods or something like that and don't do anything until you finish the series. If you don't plan on reading the series, I suggest you stick around because I'm going to be talking about things that go beyond this series. So even if you're not interested in it, I think you'll still find this video interesting. This video is going to be pretty deep, so grab your favorite snack, hit the subscribe and like button real quick, and bear with me while I tell you about the humanity of Monster by Naoki Urasawa. Human beings can become anything. One of the major discussions happening within Monster is the wide variance of humans. This may seem obvious, but it is certainly interesting to think about. People are so incredibly susceptible to influence. In fact, people are shaped around influence. The vast amount of possible difference between two people is astonishing. One person can be a heartless serial killer that cares only for themselves, while the other can care so much about the well-being of other people, even those they don't know, that they put themselves in risk of harm. One person might be so addicted to drugs that they are willing to be homeless. Another might prize a single person above all others. One person could be so engulfed in their normal daily life that they forget that there are people who have lived lives filled with tragedy. Some people are good people that do bad things because they are confused. How do people end up being so different despite being 99.99% the same? It is through influence. Human beings can become anything. Remember that. A person raised with loving parents will most likely become a loving parent themselves. A person raised with abusive parents has a high chance of becoming an abusive parent. Sometimes the opposite happens as well. Someone may be raised in a terrible way, which drives them to do everything they can to make sure they raise their children in a good way. So in a sense, they're still being influenced by having bad parents. They are just twisting it and doing the opposite, which is a good thing. This can happen even after a person is fully grown as well. Other people and events are able to shape and influence a person so much that they become different people. These things are obvious, but we don't often think about them, or at least I don't hear people talking about them that much. When I think about the title of this series, I think about who the word monster applies to. Obviously, it's referencing Johan, but we see several other terrible people in this series. Some have motives that are arguably worse than Johan's. Maybe the title refers to the possibility that anyone can become a monster. Anyone can be what our society perceives as bad or monster-like. Now, maybe that's too deep into speculation, and maybe it doesn't make any sense, and it's dumb, but it does make sense to me, and I think it's cool. It's a neat little thing to think about. In Monster, Johan becomes part of an experiment that results in him being a heartless killer who has no idea who he is. Eva is raised by her rich father and is always given everything she wants. When this is all taken away from her, she becomes enraged and transforms into a drunk. An ex-police officer named Richard has quit drinking so that his daughter will want to see him again. Another example of people being influenced is when Johan convinces a bunch of children to play a suicide game. It's very dark, that's for sure. The children are so easily convinced that this game is exciting and acceptable to play. Johan also manipulates a bunch of criminals to do work for them that is outside what they normally do. Of course, this is all fictional, so it's like, it's not real, but there's no telling that a single man could manipulate children to commit suicide, but the fact that people are so easily influenced to become certain things is interesting to think about, and I think it's a real thing that happens. It says a lot about who and what we are in this world. How have you been influenced? What has made you the way you are? How has social media changed your perspective, your views? Where does any of that come from? Is it all through influence of things outside yourself? It makes you wonder what is truly you. In my opinion, people are their experiences, but I could certainly be wrong. I told you we'd get deep. From my interpretation of Monster, these are the sort of questions that Johan is battling. Him and many of the other boys from Kinderheim 511 feel that they don't even exist. Nothing matters to them. One character named Grimer even had his son die and had no reaction to it. This is why Johan feels the need to kill and cause chaos. None of it matters, so why not? This brings us to the second part of my discussion here. The battle of nihilism and meaning. When I look back on it, this whole series is a sort of battle between nihilism and meaning. Johan represents nihilism and Dr. Tenma represents meaning. Johan's time on the page consists primarily of causing pain and chaos. Most of Dr. Tenma's time consists of helping people and caring for people. Monster is great at subtly but powerfully talking about these two things, at least in my opinion. You may feel that my interpretation of it is wrong, but again, I'm just explaining why I enjoyed it and how I feel about it. Before we continue, let's establish something. Oftentimes, the response to nihilism is religion. I consider myself a religious person, but I think this response is too easy for this story. Saying the purpose of life is to get to heaven or reach nirvana or whatever else you may believe in is very valid. But for the sake of discussion, let's agree that we're talking about the meaning of our lives and our observable reality. If that makes sense. I hope it does. In the sake of this series, the discussion is whether anything matters or if nothing matters. And again, feel free to disagree with me. Whatever. So let's start with Johan's side. Almost the first impression of Johan that we get is that he is a killer. He kills many people and causes many people to get killed. All throughout, he is doing these seemingly random acts of terror. He tries to take control of the economy by becoming the puppet master of a rich man. Then later he decides he doesn't care about that anymore and tries to burn a bunch of people in a building. He convinces young children that their lives are meaningless and that nobody cares about them. Why? Why does he do these things? It seems he is trying to find out what makes humans similar, what connects us. Maybe he knows that from the very beginning. But in the end, he indefinitely determines this. We're all only really equal in death. It is an extremely nihilistic perspective, though partially true. It is true that death is one factor that applies to every person and every living thing, no matter what. So if death is the only thing that is equal, then nothing matters. I think that is the sort of basis that Johann acts on. He has no definition of self and no definition of meaning or the reason behind life. In turn, he turns to the only thing he believes that is the ultimate equalizer, death. And I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? The revelation of St. John the Divine. Enter Dr. Kenzo Tenma, the man who is able to make war with the beast. Dr. Tenma starts the series by putting his way of life and status at stake by choosing to believe the following: all lives are of equal value. It is with this philosophy that he chooses to save Johann instead of the mayor. He knew that the only reason the hospital director cared about the mayor was for money and power. Dr. Tenma believed that the mayor's life was no more important than the little boy's. He remembered the woman whose husband had been neglected proper care despite coming before another patient that was deemed more important. This act of saving Johann sends Dr. Tenma on the journey of the series. Later, Dr. Tenma treats a man called Jokers. That's his last name. He's a thief and a criminal. Tenma befriends this man and sees that despite being a criminal, he's just a person. There's a reason why he is the way that he is. There's a reason why he is a thief. He's not just inherently evil or bad. This man is later killed by Johann in front of Tenma. And now we have set up the two colliding ideas of the series. Despite Johann's darkness, we see several instances of light and humanity, simple things, nothing grandiose or monumental, at least not at face value. But instead is the things that truly connect us, in my opinion, the things that make us human. The flaw in Johann's idea is that while death is equal, it does not make humans more equal than it makes random single-cell organisms equal. What truly makes us equal is our wants and desires. No matter how bad a person is, they still have desires and wants the same way a good person does. Let me make an example of this. Take Tenma's ex, Eva. She is what one would call a bad person. She drinks excessively, uses people, and lacks any drop of compassion. At some point, she shares a meal with a man who has killed a lot of people himself. Not that she's killed people, but I'm just saying he's killed a lot of people, so he is a bad person. Technically, he's done bad things. She's done bad things. In that moment, while they are sharing a meal, their pasts are not important. The act of simply eating together brings a warmth and comfort, a glimmer of peace. Later, Eva falls in love with a man named Martin. She reveals her true self to him, and despite him seeing that her bad side, I guess, he still sees the good in her. He ends up sacrificing himself for Eva. Eva reflects on how Martin was happy because he knew Eva was waiting for him at a train station. Now, if you haven't read Monster, this might not make sense, but I'm trying to summarize what happened. The simple knowledge that you are important to just one person makes you feel what we call happiness. It's such a simple thing to like feel important to just one other person. But those things mean so much to us. Now tell me, how can nothing matter if those things that are so simple matter? The whole series is filled with those small human moments that greatly contrast the terror of Johann's nihilism. Let's look more at Dr. Tenma. Why does Dr. Tenma feel the need to kill Johann? It's simple. He feels responsible for bringing him back to life. He believes that he is responsible for all of Johann's murders. So, in order to maintain his feeling of peace, he has to right his wrong. People who care about him try to stop him because they know they know Dr. Tenma, is a good, caring man, not a killer. That is Dr. Tenma's problem. He wants to become a killer because he cares about people, but if he kills someone, he is going against his philosophy that all lives are equal, essentially, at least in my opinion. Again, I could be wrong about all this. It's just my perspective. In the end, Dr. Tenma has the opportunity to kill Johann, but he doesn't. Someone else shoots him, and again, someone else shoots Johann, and again, Dr. Tenma brings Johann back to life at the end. This speaks so much on how we cannot blame ourselves for not seeing the future, yet we often do. All we can do is act on what we believe. In the end, Dr. Tenma stays true to himself and rejects Johann's idea that death is the only thing we are equal in. The final chapters of this series revolve around the idea that most evil people have humanity to them. Eva is one example. Another is Roberto. Roberto is a character that I hated the most throughout the series. I absolutely abhorred him. I wanted to see this character get killed, and to be honest, I wanted to see him get killed in a brutal way. But at the end, when it is revealed that he was just another victim of the Kinderheim 511 experiment and another victim of Johann's manipulation, I was in awe. And I felt sort of uncomfortable because I felt so strongly that this man was pure evil, but yet again, I was faced with the idea that people are not just inherently evil. I never thought that Roberto would just be another human molded to be evil or bad, or what we perceive as bad, I guess you could say. It's a very interesting concept that our society, or a lot of societies, often neglect. Monster by Naoki Urasawa is a fantastic series. There are so many characters that I loved that I didn't talk about. So many. I loved all the characters in one way or another. The mystery is very exciting as well. I want to leave you with just two things. First, remember this quote. I keep bringing it up, but I think it's one of the most impactful quotes to me in the series, and it's very interesting how it's sort of sprinkled out and it becomes apparent. Human beings can become anything. Lastly, a quote from a character I spent most of the series hating. The past never disappears. You can't run away. The important thing is to face up to it and move forward.